The Father Factory is a coaching service for dads that addresses the intergenerational impact of their trauma from childhood sexual violence. Voice lessons will help to bridge the traumatic past with its current developed spiritual, medical, physical, and behavioral conditions that are the result of CSV. Join us to help dads be intentional parents.
Voice Lessons, a podcast of the Father Factory. Part 2 of my discussion with Mr. Quentin Walcott. He's the co-founder of the Father Day Pledge to End Domestic Violence. He's the co-executive director of Connect. So Q, tell us a little bit about hypermasculinity, right? You know, my whole idea of bringing you on and talking was really to kind of talk about this idea of this toxic masculinity and the threat that it serves on the family, right? There's this impact that families are experiencing, and toxic masculinity is definitely an underlining factor in it that we have not really been touching and dealing with because it's so ingrained in what we believe is manhood, and our even our patriarch, you know, and how we kind of, you know, view you know, toughness and all of that good stuff. And as I think about it, I remember in the trainings that you guys did, and you guys would show videos and stuff. And I just recall, like, yeah, like, you know, like I'm going to show my age, like Clint Eastwood movies back in the day, right? Or any, like the Batman and Robin.
For your time too, man.
The Batman and Robin stuff, right? Where they, you know, get punched in the face and it's just a pew, pow, boom, right? And they just keep going, right? And I'm just like, I think it probably hurts to get punched in the face like that or get a chair over your back or something like that. But it's these images that keep pushing toward us to show us what is acceptable and where we should be. And I'll also throw out that whole concept of well-meaning men. So hit me, what you got for
Yeah, you know, masculinity is, and we kind of like focus on toxic is like the latest term that people are using right now, but it's been like hyper, it's been like super masculinity.
Yeah.
But the reality is that there's different forms of masculinity. So we call it masculinities, right? That there's different types. And I like to think of masculinity as a mask that people put on in different situations. And I'll explain a little bit more, but it's just something, and masculinity is fluid. If you think about, you know, when you wake up in the morning and you're with your family, or and it's a safe household, right? Like how do you act? How do you behave, right? So what is your attitude? So masculinity is really an attitude, right? Mm-hmm. So what is your attitude? I just met your son, one of your sons, and like when you all are waking up in the morning and starting your day, you know, what is your attitude with your family and around your family? And then if you depending on the neighborhood you live in, you know, what's going on in your neighborhood? What mask do I need to put on once I get out my door and walk down the block? And if I see police, if I see gangs, if I see, you know, whatever it is that could be a threat to you, how does your attitude change, right? So thinking about it in that way, in a real, you know, just a real basic level.
Yeah.
And the more toxic you are, the more potential it is for violence or doing harm, you know, and that might be. And we always look at toxic masculinity as just such a negative impact on someone else. But sometimes we're thinking about masculinity in a way that's about a self-defense. I need to be hyper toxic in this moment to protect myself from other men or from more powerful men or from a threat, you know, and it may not be who I am. It might not be who I am in my entirety, but like, in those few moments or during that time where I live, I have to put this mask on so I can get home at the end of the day, right? So if we frame it that way, entry points to having conversations and working with men and boys and women, because like I'll show you right now. So looking at, you know, just this definition of masculinity as a set of attributes and behaviors and roles associated with boys and men as a social construct. And it's really about, you know, we kind of assign it to a male because of male body parts, but it's actually something that looks very different in different cultures. And it's something that, and these are just traits that anyone can take on, right? So it's not just about men and boys per se. If you look at it as an attitude, and we all know masculine women, and we know kind of like the more feminine men. And femininity is not even just a thing about being women. It's about safety, and it's about respect and treating people a certain way. So if you look at again as an attitude and as a mask, and in the mainstream society dictates what's going to happen depending on what form of masculinity we present. So and it's really in the West, masculinity looks very different from African culture, or countries in South America, Latin America. But here we have this cowboy image of masculinity, which is also not just male, it's also white. So, if we had more time, we could talk about what Black masculinity is.
Yeah.
How that impacts our families, and where do we get that from, and what are we modeling when we perform that. So, and it's all, again, it's attitude, it's a performance. Sometimes we live in it too long. We stay in that character too long.
Yeah.
The Hulk, and, even the Hulk and how he turns into the Hulk, right? If you remember that story, that something harmful is happening.
Yeah.
Sense it's danger. So I'm going to become this big version of myself.
Yeah.
And then you look at, when you look at, how culture and people in communities, how they dress, how they look. And there's nothing wrong with about, dressing those ways. But the other issue around it is how people perceive you and how they use their masculinity to approach you because of a, not a real threat of masculinity coming back. And then, of course, Tyson and everything that represents Tyson now. And even Tyson, I know he's getting ready to fight, so he's putting on a new mask around his image of being tough and strong. But even his masculinity has changed over the years as he's been introspective about his life. Yeah. And, like you talked about, masculinity is not just about, bravado and physicality. If you think about, the owner of Amazon, Bill Gates, that's a certain level of masculinity as well. That comes from, wealth masculinity, economic masculinity, and even, intelligence. There's different levels of masculinity that play out and play shape and take shape.
Nice. Yeah.
Right. And then, pictures of fatherhood in this way, young man on the train with his son and his wife or girlfriend or whatever it may be. That's another form of masculinity that we look at. And then we look at, sexual prowess. Yeah. This man, has his hand on this woman's butt. That's another level of showing off a certain level of masculinity. And then this gentleman right here, I don't know if you remember him from back in the day on the New York City trains, asking for money. But he was saw him in a film with in a training I was doing around family therapy, and he's abusive in his family. And he was a little person, not necessarily missing limbs. He was just a little person, but he was abusing his family, right? His children and his wife, who's probably close to 6 feet tall. Wow. Right? It's just other images of masculinity, men in uniforms, and that nature.
Yeah.
But the point I wanted to make was like the range of masculinity really quickly, right?
Sure.
So there's two things on this I want you to think about. And this term in the middle is a term that I kind of framed as middle masculinity. Like, where we kind of hover, we're kind of getting ready. When you're looking for that elevator, it's going to come up on the left side, on the right side, you stand in the middle. So you got, one step in the right direction, right? So I want to ask you this question, and then anyone watching and listening, where do you think you fall on this range of masculinity, just in general?
In general, wow. I'm probably definitely between feminine and middle. Yeah.
And when are you that way?
Probably more around family, close family in my household. My guards aren't up. Feel like I gotta grill nobody unless it's homework time.
Right. Even that is a form of masculinity. You gotta show I'm the one telling you what you need to do for your own safety and having a good life, right?
Yeah.
So you fall around here. I fall around here too, around my family, but somewhere around the middle, right or left of the middle, is where I think most people find themselves, you know, if they're really honest about it. And it depends on where they're at, what's going on for them. And then some people are, you know, leaning different times. I lean right here, left, right of middle, and close to hypertoxic, depending on where I'm at and what situations I'm in, right? So it's fluid.
Yeah.
Say that to say.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the breakdown, right? Most people are in the middle. Most men are hover in the middle. Yeah. You know, because, you know, just like you said, when I'm safe, I drop my mask. I could be closer to who I truly am, my most vulnerable self, because I don't have to posture, right? Most women are in the middle, but more towards feminine as well. Because, you know, and that just might be about being more sure of yourself and who you are as a person, not necessarily your gender, right? So most people are kind of huddled in the middle and more towards the feminine. So the other question I have for you, and does this make sense to you?
It does, big time.
So if you think about it as masculinities, so now when you kind of really break it down even further, when you think about femininity, and sometimes, you know, men in particular get caught up in the term feminine, but we're bigger than that. It's a term, it's a form of masculinity, actually, right? So, and it's really about safety, security, and being more true to who you really are, because we all have feminine and masculine sides to ourselves, right? So that's about safety. And hypertoxic, if you look at it, when people are edging in that way or even beyond what we think is normal toxicity, sometimes it's about, like we talked about, self-defense. It's a strategy. I need to be like this in this moment so I can get home. Or like I work with young people that have joined gangs, and they've joined gangs to prevent themselves from being recruited from another gang. So joining this gang was about safety in my community, or being involved with some form of unhealthy behavior in the community is about, you know, my reputation, not being viewed as soft, and, you know, things of those nature. So sometimes when it's not safe, we look at those harmful expressions of gender. And it's really, and then you think about masculinity, and what makes it different in terms of gender is that as men or males, we have male privilege. We have certain levels of entitlements, certain levels of expectations as men. So if you add that to masculinity, it can be potentially explosive.
Wow. So Q, would you say that this is like fight or flight, and constant living in flight or fight, or in any of those, right? And kind of wearing that as a caricature, or, you know, or kind of living that out. Would you say that?
Yeah, I think it comes into that. I mean, you know, it's not, again, it's fluid. A lot of times when we think about race or racism, right? So that's why I say, going back to the slide really quick, it's like, so you figured out where you see yourself. Now the other piece is like, where do people see you? And why? Right? So if you think about racism and a lot of the police violence and systemic violence right now, it's like the images, stereotypes of how we view Black men, people of color in particular, that informs how I'm going to approach you and attack you, right? Or how I'm going to intervene with you, right? Because of my own stigmas around racism and masculinity. And many times, a little 9-year-old boy or 9-year-old Black boy is viewed by the police as an adult man, 190 pounds, a threat, right? So a lot of that is built into, you know, misinformed ideas of masculinities, about racism, about classism, and it's all levels of masculinity, all those power systems. And we do this exercise so when we want to work with men and boys and, you know, engage them and have these conversations with men and men's roundtables, or wherever you may be working with men in the church, wherever it may be, is that we got to merge where we see ourselves with how people see us. And at that intersecting point is where you start having these conversations. You know what I mean? So it's really important to think about, how do people view me, so you can adapt and adjust yourself And it's unfortunate we have to do that, right? We have to kind of downplay ourselves because someone sees us as a threat because of harmful ideas of toxic masculinity.
Wow.
Right?
Wow, which could probably lead to like explosive, reactions, right? So if I'm constantly, they have that whole talk about that at work, men are, they don't feel like men,
Right.
but then when they get home,
To take it out on the families.
yeah, take it
So
out.
if you feel hopeless and powerless and all these other things, for some men, that's what happens. They come home and we're socialized, or that I'm supposed to be the head of the household, and what I say goes. And if I haven't been feeling that on the workplace, I'm gonna take that home, or vice versa, right? So if I'm in a position of power, I'm being abused at home, I'm gonna take that out on my workplace.
Yeah, and the concept of head of the household is a Christian concept, but the balanced concept of that in Christianity definitely has to do with you're serving your family, right? Your leadership is balanced in that you serve your family, that that God created men and women equal in dignity, in personhood, in value, right? But we have distinct differences in that we are this male leadership, you lead in a self-sacrificing way, where you'll give your life for your family, and when you grab that kind of concept as a Christian or as an individual grabbing that concept, you find yourself extending yourself to your community, right? Because it's about the protection of your household and your family, in a healthy way, and then you protect your community, you protect your world. And it makes me think about this work that gets done, right? Because when I did the work in my previous work, and meeting in groups with men, one of the things that I used to say to the men was like, if you want your child to feel safe, you've got to keep mom safe. Right? You got to show mom love, respect, dignity, all of that. And they're like, what? But she's with the next man, and I'm not doing this. And I'll be like, well, if she's with the next man and they don't have food in that house, you go ahead and buy groceries and put food in that house. We had one guy that argued about it, and he actually did it and talked about how great of a response and a real spark with building back up a relationship with his baby mother and the children, because it is about that safety and that balance that definitely comes about. I look at this and I'm like, wow, like I want men to be able to walk away, one, identifying if they are well-meaning men, right? Or perpetrators, right? I want you to see your sin, acknowledge that, repent of that, right? And do differently. But I think what has to happen is accountability, is to call out what are those what are those behaviors that happen that actually speak towards controlling and or doing violence towards women and children. Any examples of like what that actually looks like?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think yeah, how you kind of described accountability is exactly how I define it. Acknowledging harm done, realizing that there are consequences to my actions, and that can look like many different things. Sometimes, I'm not someone that's really kind of pro systems because of racism and how they're biased in many ways, and systemic responses to domestic violence and to other forms of violence in our communities. But and then also, so that can mean some type of reparations, or that could be you got to go to a group, or you have to go to your father's group. And I know we've combined men's roundtable with that, and have those conversations. You know what I mean? About what does it mean to respect the mother of your children, even though you're not together, and building amicable relationships for the sake of the child, right? And moving away from that idea of I need to control who she's with, even when I'm not with her anymore, right? So all of those things.
Yeah.